Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at, ladies and gents. I am Kura Isagami, your resident tinker and Medarotter, and this is the Medarot News Network, bringing you the latest developments and happenings with our favorite pet fighting robot series. Today with me, I actually have a special guest and a very dear friend of mine. I'd like to introduce my buddy Ruben, who's going to be co-hosting today's episode. Ruben, how you doing, bud?
Hi there, I'm pretty good. Thank you so much for having me today.
How are you feeling about today's announcement episode? Have you seen it yet?
I have seen it. I'm very excited. I think some more great things are coming towards Medabots, and I cannot wait to see them in-game myself. So that's going to be cool.
Absolutely, yes. And as you see here from the title here, we do have, I'm going to call him a returnee who actually started up on 7. And with that being said, I did call this episode From the Ashes, going into that motive of what he is, which we will be divulging into shortly. So with that aside, let's go ahead and get started. So they first announced the introduction of Garutman, the Garuda type that first debuted in Medarot 7. His kit has overall not changed, aside from getting leg abilities in Medarot 8, I believe, with level drain head, double melt for his arms, and biped legs. As of Medarot 8 forward, when they introduced leg abilities, they have introduced him with auto charge, which passively buffs Metaforce gauge for every action completed. So Ruben, what are your thoughts on that kind of build for this kind of kit?
Honestly, I think this might be the best kit for a build like this. For some reason, well, of course, it's a Phoenix, so Melt needs to be in there. Level Drain has always been an interesting choice to me for this particular kit, but I think it just suits. And of course, his leg ability of the charge helps perfectly, for example, his meta change as well. So that's a very interesting play on how they decided to port him over.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited.
Absolutely, yeah. And honestly, we actually have seen meta auto charge before on a couple bots prior. Chrono Rabbit comes to mind, and the recent Digimon collaboration with Omega Knight also as well. So that passive Metaforce charge, even just to regular actions, is really nice. Not touching on the fact that if you choose to charge Metaforce on your turn, that's basically 40% instead of your standard 30.
Exactly, so that's a very nice and friendly boost if you want to play that route. So that's very exciting,
Absolutely, and on top of that, I should also mention that Garutman is also one of the few bots that is considered gender N. So the parts are not exclusive to one tin pet or the other, but they can be used on either depending on what kind of modifier needs to be met.
Well, that's perfect. Neutral bots are always a lot of fun, and I've got way too many neutral bot parts that I can maybe finally use for the right use.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we might actually see a modifier one of these days where it's gender N bots only. I mean, I
really hope so.
I mean, we've got Concave and Convex. We got Spanag. Now we have Garutman. So there's really no reason that we can't make a pure gender N team now.
Exactly. I do think there's going to be some feedback from the community, because I don't think everyone has too many of them, but, you know, it can be interesting, especially down the line, to see whatever they're going to do with it.
Right. And just looking overall at his stats, too, just in robot mode, he's got a pretty solid kit overall. Even without having pierce damage, his base damage of about 1,300 to about 1,500 really isn't too bad. And parts almost clock in 3,100, but almost 4,000 for his legs. It gives him a pretty solid chunk of health, so he could take a hit or two without suffering too heavily for it.
Exactly, and I think that's another great attitude of this particular bot. I like bots that are, you know, well, he's very pleasant, both design-wise and ability-wise, but he's also not a glass cannon, which I'm personally not the biggest fan of. So yeah, I'm happy to see him return, and especially on the mobile game.
Absolutely, yeah. And on top of that, as we mentioned earlier, Garutman also has the ability of meta change, which was also released in the teaser video for this week's episode. Kind of touching on what Ruben mentioned earlier, with him taking more of a Phoenix type appearance, where he basically inverts his body 180 and sprouts fire. It's very unique meta change, honestly. Probably one of the more unique ones we've seen thus far. Overall, though, he does get ever so slightly of a kit change between Drive A's Melt, Drive B Fire, and Drive C Time Attack, with the leg ability Breakneck. Now, overall, Melt and Fire, nothing new. We've seen it before. He has Melt already in his basic kit, but this is also our first time having Time Attack as an official attack that we can use in-game. And to divulge on that briefly, Time Attack is one of two kind of variant attacks that are reliant on consecutive use or the row battle timer. Time Attack in particular starts off initially weak, but for every tick of the row battle clock, its damage progressively gets higher. So Ruben, what are your thoughts on that attack overall?
That sounds great. That whole idea of the attack goes perfectly a bit behind the idea of a phoenix. Going stronger over time. It has that same element, so that's very cool. And frankly, I haven't heard of that before. I love it. I'm a big fan, and I think I might be spamming that one a lot now.
It's going to be a very unique attack, but I should mention the other one in particular is known as counterattack, which, just to touch that one briefly, is for every consecutive use, its power gets progressively stronger. I believe when we had Story Mode Arc 3 in the game, and they released Aquarius from the Navi series, they gave her time attack on both her arms with Charge Plant, I believe, for her head. So we've seen counterattack before. And honestly, out of the two of them, I would actually say that counterattack is probably the more efficient of the two, because that one's reliant on your strategy, like you mentioned, of using it more than once. Whereas with time attack, that's essentially reliant on the clock ticking down. And even if you go it on ×3 speed, that clock that clock takes a little while to tick.
That's very true. That you're absolutely right. Yeah. So I guess it's a bit more of a gamble, but if damage builds up, hopefully it will eventually play out. I think the opposite, the good thing for time attack then is that unlike counterattack, you're not forced to only use that one.
Right.
If you use something else in your counterattack kit, it's kind of a waste of your turn if you think about it. But this is kind of fun that it could be like the last second thing. It's not dependent on anything but the actual combat or the actual clock ticking down. So that's an interesting twist, and yeah, I would love to see what people do with this as well. Might be like a bit of a secret weapon at the end.
Right, that's what I was figuring too, especially with being a massive player on the DOT. And it's honestly really nice that they're re-implementing that as a potential meta as well, especially since they did an overhaul to the mechanics several months ago, where a lot of ailments like Melt actually did almost nothing and was nearly useless in late game content. But thanks to that buff, whenever I end up using a DOT in any kind of build or even just for fun, I've seen an average of about 150, I think maybe close to 200 sometimes with every burn effect when the clock ticks. So it's definitely a lot better than the 50 and 75 that it was when the game first launched.
Exactly, and I'm so glad that has been a thing because, like you said, most of them were just kind of useless, even though in especially 9, I used them all the time, so it's kind of fun to see them, being useful again.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at his stats here as well in meta change form, naturally his HP pool is going to be relatively high because it's just fusing all his HP bars into one, par for the course with standard meta change. His leg type change into flying also is to be expected. The breakneck ability passively buffs heat cool stats, is also a really nice effect of getting that extra boost of speed, especially on the terrains that flight legs are great on. And then an evade stat of almost 2200 is really, really good to help him, if not dodge outright, graze attacks to keep from ailments touching him.
Exactly, and I think especially that speed that I would love to see with this Medarot, to see what exactly is going to happen and how good that's going to be in practice.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
I have to say, I do have a weak spot for meta changes that change their leg typing. So it's always fun to see when they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've definitely seen bipeds changing into flight thus far. I mean, Arcbeetle D is a very good example of that, and he definitely benefits from that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, but moving right on ahead, Garutman was not the only bot that was introduced. Upcoming, we do have 2 spotlights coming up this week. The first of which is for Attractor, the Alraune type, who is in the game since launch, with a head part of Virus. Arms are the shooting variant of Destroy, tank legs, and the leg ability of Carrier, which chances to pass a debuff active from you onto your target. Now, Attractors definitely had a long run, especially since her debut in Medarot 4, I believe. And then coming back in Navi and just kind of sticking around with the main library since. What are your thoughts on this particular model, Ruben?
Frankly, the model itself, I quite like the idea of just, well, it's a trap plant that attracts. I love the idea of it, therefore I think the kit is also very suiting for it. In general, design-wise, I love it. I haven't really used it before in any of the other games because it's not my kind of kits to play.
Right.
But every time I came across it, I do really like the designs. I have used the legs a few times. But that's kind of it, yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, her head is I've found very incredible use of in early game as well as in late game with Virus, because it's really helpful for turn skipping, especially the more dangerous foes that you'd see in either EX trials or even PvP, to buy your nuker or your shielder that extra half second to get to the line, or keep someone off your tail so that you have that time to prep for that nuke move.
Exactly, and therefore, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the inclusion again. I think we're going to see some fun things, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And then on top of that, having Double Destroy makes using her pretty simple as well. Albeit the attack itself is pretty conditional, it does make its use pretty handy if you know how to trigger it properly.
That's very true. I think timing is everything with especially Destroy.
Right, and just to touch on that ever so briefly, Destroy is a very unique attack to the game. It's gone through a lot of changes from when it was first introduced unto the most recent game with Medarot S, and it behaves in one of three ways. If it targets a part that the target has already used or is going to use, heat or cool phase, the part is guaranteed to be broken. If the targeted part is a defense part that is currently active on the fields, for instance, Baron Castle's shield, and he's planted his butt on the line, the shield part active is guaranteed to be broken. If it does not meet either of the above requirements, the attack does minimal damage.
Exactly. I feel like it's all of those high risk, high reward things.
Absolutely.
Especially against shielders. Like this, Destroy parts against shielders are truly a blessing.
Absolutely, yeah. And on top of that, it's a lot better than what Destroy was earlier, where you had to literally catch them in their cooldown phase exclusively. Otherwise,
Yes.
you would do next to zilch.
The idea that their back needs to be faced towards you, I'm happy with these changes, for sure.
Right, absolutely. But she wasn't the only spotlight that was added. The other one that we had that's upcoming this week is the Maid type Brightness, who debuted in Medarot DS. She is exclusively non-attacking, focusing on support and healing skills instead, with a skill kit of Trap Clear, Double Stat Cleanse, with the leg ability Trap Buster, which removes active traps on your side of the field when charging Metaforce. One thing I have to stand out and mention for Brightness in particular is that she takes a really unique design, not just on the humanoid design motif and idea in general, but also the fact that she doesn't have the standard face type or design like a lot of the other models do, with an either LCD eyes or some kind of built-in face of the like. Instead, her entire face seems to be like an LCD screen.
Yes, you can actually, if you like properly look at her and zoom in a little bit, you can actually see the individual LEDs, which is actually amazing. I'm really happy that we have a face design like that. I think it's so creative. I can only imagine what kind of other things will be portrayed on that face, like on that screen.
Just imagine the emote and expression capabilities on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, but even though she doesn't look like a lot at first glance, she actually does bring a lot to the table, especially in higher end teams and endgame content, with Stat Cleanse. And to touch on that one ever so briefly, Stat Cleanse, contrary to the belief where it just removes ailments on a team, it actually applies to where it removes negative ailments and it renders you immune to them for a set number of times. I believe when I've tried it out on myself, I've probably seen about 2 or 3, maybe even up to 5 hits, I think, depending on the part rank, that you are outright immune to any kind of negative ailment whatsoever, as long as Stat Cleanse is in effect.
That is actually really impressive. I was only aware, well, sorry, that's what I thought at least, that it only removes, negative stats and whatnot. So it's really cool. That makes you immune as well. I have no idea.
Yes, it's actually incredibly handy, especially in a game where meta is, is determined by speed and how quickly you can get to the line to nuke. If you make use of Stat Cleanse on a team, you can basically render any kind of stun locker, be it virus or bug or shock or freeze or anything of the like. You don't even have to worry about it, because you'll still take damage from a minimal base attack, because, reminder, ailments are not designed to deal a lot of damage. They're meant specifically to render an effect that makes it harder for you and easier for them to deal with. But with Stat Cleanse, all you have to do is essentially take a flick or a light slug on the arm, but that's about it.
Well, that's actually great. I think I might be using her a bit more often. I have to say, for me as well, she felt kinda in that territory where I'm not really interested so much. Unless, of course, you talk about like endgame. But Staff Clean starts to sound really good to me as well, so I might give it a shot, see what I can get.
Absolutely, and the really nice thing I want to touch base on as well is where a lot of other skills, like for instance shoot and melee, often require you to have the level raised on the metal in order to use it efficiently. Heal is one of those ones that is kind of in a really weird limbo, where depending on the part, you can either cap it or push it up to the 51 and make it the minor skill, or you could even raise it, or not even raise it at all and leave it at 0, and you have it exclusively on the metal just to use. Because there is no buff or anything that Stat Cleanse offers that's reliant on the metal's level. It's literally there to cleanse and negate ailments.
That's perfect. Yeah, big fan. Really big fan of that.
Trap Clear also, I would honestly see that one as a much more niche move than Stat Cleanse, because it's not very often you'll see someone that's using a setup skill, especially traps in particular, while on the field. So I'd probably say that's probably the least useful of her parts, but not going to completely count it out.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Absolutely.
Trap Buster does make her pretty handy, though, for those that end up doing so. So if you, say, for instance, go up against an EX trial or something where they are using a setup skill, for instance, Bad Hacker, pretty much like a bug would be to a real deal maid, Brightness would be his nightmare.
I can just imagine him being run around with a Hoover on behind him.
I mean, there you go. She's got it built onto her arm.
Exactly.
Yep. On top of that, pretty much as mentioned last week with the collaboration, the Omega Sisters collab is going to carry on for another week. However, this time around, because they are cycling in new bots, the bots that allow and provide for bonus tickets will be cycled as well. I believe Omega Tail and Burris Titalio will also still be considered in that +5 bonus to each respective color, because as far as I'm aware, their banners should remain until the very end of the month. So if you have not had a chance to snag either of those two yet, then you still have an option. No need to fret too heavily. Pretty much like last week, though. If you've already pulled and snagged all the limited rewards like the Cyplasium and the Dream Metal and the Rubies, I would take this week, and even coming weeks to follow the longer the dungeon's out, to farm for materials and resources you might be running low on or need to top off on, because an event to farm like this for tickets that you can farm for nearly indefinite resources, this is definitely a great opportunity to take advantage of.
Exactly, especially since that's been extended. Make sure you use that opportunity as much as you can. It's great. I know what I will be doing for the rest of the week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just keep going in the background and just keep mining.
One of my particular favorite methods right now is to farm for a particular ticket and then wait until I have about 5,000. Because I discovered that if you farm to about, I think they said 49.95, I believe is the highest cap, and then you buy 999 of the 1,000 credit tickets, that's basically a free million credits.
Oh, that's great.
So it's basically free money.
Oh, perfect. All right. Yeah, that's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this week we actually have a brand new model that's coming and joining the Fierce Battles. A lot of folks know him before from earlier games. He's definitely been around for a while, and that is Rhino Rush, with guard 500 for his head, missiles for both arms, tank legs, and the ability Super Armor. Ruben, what are your thoughts overall on Rhino Rush?
I start. Interesting kid. Not particularly my favorite. The same counted sadly in DS as well. It's alright, I suppose. I don't have any particularly hard feelings towards this guy.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. He definitely is packing a lot of armor, and he has honestly a fantastic leg ability of Super Armor, which renders users immune to paralyze ailments. That is Shock, Freeze, and I believe Tornado also is included in that mix. It renders you immune to them a set number of times depending on part rank. However, I believe I don't believe that's enough to particularly forgive Rhino Rush's kit and his overall viability. Not to say that missiles don't have a place, because AoEs can still be made useful under the right conditions, but as a primary form of offense, like what he's packing, it's unfortunately not enough to make him super viable.
It's frankly a shame. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think as a full set, I don't see a proper use for him yet. Maybe if the meta changes again and my missiles do become a little bit more fun, but until then, he's mostly going to be sitting on the sideline, I'm afraid.
Right, absolutely. And on top of that, his head is guard 500, which basically means it's a basic guard, a simple shield where he takes the blow for you. The difference, however, is that he basically will subtract 500 from the base damage outright when he tanks the blow. So, I mean, in early game, that's actually not too bad, especially when you're dealing no more than maybe like 1,000 damage at the very highest on a crit. But in late game, where you're clocking nearly 3,000 or even up to 5,000, or even on a critical hit, I've clocked up to 13,000 on his parts on certain moves. That 500 is not going to do you anything.
No, sadly it doesn't scale. So
yeah,
very good early game, like you said, but
yeah, and unfortunately, anything with a basic guard head that's not perfect guard, shoot guard, or melee guard. Honestly, I'd even throw counter guard and melee guard, counter and mirror guard in there too, just for the sake of having them. If it's not any of those, it's basically you putting a target on your back that says, shoot me.
Very true, very true.
So overall, I mean, because he's a fierce battle, I'd say farm for him anyway, just so you have the parts. I mean, again, super armor is a pretty handy ability to have, and in the rare instance where you're forced to use tank legs, say for instance, EX Trial or PvP League, either of the two, I'd say farm for him anyway, just to have him. But out of 10 in terms of viability and farming, I'd probably rate him about a 1, 2 at the best. Would you agree with that, Ruben, or do you think you might rate him differently?
I mean, it sounds a little harsh, but in retrospect, I think you're right. Sadly.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not that he has a bad kit overall. It's just as a pure set in particular, there's definitely more and there's definitely better options for what he offers.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
Yeah, and then moving on to the next fierce battle for this week is Thorny Devil, who is a newcomer to Medarot 8 and has definitely made his place sticking around since then. Of course, I understand his name does sound kind of silly. For the longest time, I simply called him Thorny Devil for that particular reason. You know who you are. But just to touch on that briefly, the reason for his design and his name was actually based off of a horned lizard that you'd see on desert terrains. And that actually did enlighten a lot of people after I mentioned that thought to them.
Exactly, I think it's a common misconception.
Absolutely.
I think everyone wears this name has to do a double take. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure translation probably contributed to part of that as well, where I'm pretty sure it doesn't sound as awkward in Japanese, but in English, we're going to look over here and go, heh, horny, but, that's why I said I usually call him Thorny Devil for the longest time for that very reason.
And here we are.
Yeah, I know.
Publicly announcing it. This will be clipped. I hope you understand.
I'm pretty much expecting that, unfortunately. But in overall, he has a kit of Fire Shot, Double Missile with a wheel leg and the ability of Desert type. Now, in contrast to Rhino Rush, who is basically heavy armor with a tank leg, even though he does have missile arms much like Rhino Rush, Thorny Devil brings a lot more to the table that makes him much more viable. Both not just as a pure set, but also as mixed parts. The first of which is Fire Shot, which kind of touches base on what we mentioned earlier with DOTs and Garutman, where they very heavily buffed the effect that takes place when you're triggering one of those.
Right, exactly.
And then on top of that, his leg ability, Wield, also is one of the fastest base speed legs in the game. The issue with wheeled legs that I've seen is that they're probably the pickiest when it comes to terrain matching. And I believe, with the exception of Cyber Terrain, which everybody has S rank on regardless, Wield is actually one of the only legs that does not have an S rank terrain on anything.
Which, frankly, is a bit of a shame. You would kind of hope that it has a bit more of a natural... I mean, it's Wield. Surely there must be some kind of, more common proper terrain that's suited.
Right. I mean, even on Stadium terrain, I believe Stadium is probably one of its best matches at A rank. I don't think I've ever seen it on S rank before. But what stands out in particular with Thorny Devil is his leg ability of Desert type, which grants automatic S rank leg compatibility on desert terrain, in addition to the leg standard matches. So this puts his legs at a very, very high advantage, where it's not only speedy, but you're going to get even faster on a terrain that a lot of people are already going to be struggling on.
Exactly, and of course this is great. Especially, once again, like you said so yourself, wheels types tend to be very, nitpicky what they want to go. this one in particular as well. If you're not using it for desert type, then sure, it's speedy, but better to use something else.
A wheel leg is still a wheel leg regardless, but you just need to know that you're going to have some trouble on it. But the desert type leg ability does definitely give him that extra edge, especially on a terrain where the only other leg that has S rank is flight leg. So say for instance, take this leg, pair it with Shafu's arms for melee anti-air, and you're going to go absolutely nuts.
That would be great. That would be such a powerful combo. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then the last Fierce battle that was announced for this week is Slapbeat, the bassist type, with Shoot Boost, Beam, Thundershot, and the leg ability Generator. She debuted actually as part of a series in Medarot Girls Mission, actually as their DLC no less, with 4 others that contributed as the guitarist, the keyboardist, and the drummer. Slapbeat here is the bassist. What are your thoughts overall on this series, Ruben?
I love the entire idea behind it. Music instrument bots, or music band members, I suppose. I love the idea. I think it's very creative, and I think this entire set, all of them are super well thought out. I have to say, my favorite is most likely still the drummer, just because of general design. It looks bulky and cool. Of course, the bassist here in front of us is a bit more, it's a bit more fragile, but still really cool looking design.
Absolutely, yeah. What she definitely lacks a lot of pierce damage potential as a nuker, especially since Beam has the highest damage output of optic-based moves, but it has no pierce damage. But she makes up for that with the ability that she has Shoot Boost to already buff what damage she can deal, and then she has Thundershot on top of that to stop the more dangerous foes to buy her that extra second or two.
Yeah, exactly, and especially early game, she's pretty self-efficient, where she doesn't need any outside support. Later on, you might be looking at some other issues, but especially early game, 100% self-independent. It's a pretty good bot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say her leg ability kind of leaves a little bit to be desired, since Cooler, I mean, it's nice to have because it buffs your cool stat by 20%, so it means you run from the line back to start just a little bit faster. Like I said, does kind of leave a little bit to be desired, but having a flight leg does give her that extra boost that she needs for speed. But overall, definitely very handy to get a hold of. I'd probably rate her about maybe like a 5 or 6, maybe a 7 at the highest for terms of viability. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah, so you think we'd be in agreement with saying that Thorny Devil might be the big MVP for this week?
I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
especially the leg bots.
Yeah, especially with that leg ability, that'll definitely come in handy for sure. I actually capped mine up to 90, even with it being super expensive to do so, just for the sake of having it.
Oh my goodness, I would love to see that speed for sure.
It's pretty handy for sure. Something else that was covered in particular this week was an update on the story mode Arc 5 that we were announced for last week, and they teased in weeks before. However, they teased that we're getting a brand new character that we're going to be introduced to this week, along with another brand new Medarot design. If translations are said to be accurate, I believe it said her name was Ibuki, I believe. But she goes under the nickname of Category 5, as in a hurricane, because the bio states that she is very eager to rush into things. What are your thoughts on this character, Ruben?
The character looks pretty cool. Might be a lot of fun in story. Hopefully she's gonna, cause some chaos. Definitely going to be interesting where the storyline will definitely go.
Absolutely,
yeah, cool
absolutely, and especially with that Oni type that she's supposedly going to be using.
Oh, let's talk about that design. Now that is amazing. I'm really happy with this new announced Metabot. I think it looks fantastic. I really do.
Absolutely, and in fact, I've actually seen teasers for a while of this mysterious model. I believe it's ON something, if I recall correctly. We couldn't quite figure out what that last digit was. Maybe it might be a mistranslation, but she's honestly given that very serious Oni vibe, which will definitely give Kaimangar, another Oni type, for a run for his money.
Absolutely. So it's going to be fun, especially see if we can combine the two in a nice team.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what her kit's going to be. I'm anticipating probably like a basic sword, but given something like this, I'd probably even see Charge Blade as a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll definitely be subject to follow as information comes out and she's officially released. But yeah, definitely a sweet design. Looking forward to starting that new character arc this week on Thursday when everything goes live. Gonna be exciting for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, keep your eyes out, I would say.
Absolutely. And I believe that pretty much covers everything for this week that was announced, aside from some missed news, like for instance with the Medarot Reloaded manga, a couple retweet contests that are going on Twitter for it, for some small prizes. But I believe that covers everything for today, so thanks for stopping by, folks. If you want to know more, you can follow us below on the Medarot News Network page or the Metabots Forever community on Facebook. You can also join us on Discord on the Project Rising Beetles Medarot server, where we are the most active and up-to-date with all new information upcoming, and even working on translation projects. I believe we've actually managed to finish 2 of them thus far, with Medarot R and the original Medarot 1 fully translated into English, and the first and progress making towards Medarot 3, if I recall correctly.
Yes, correct. 3 is going surprisingly well. Always fun to update and see what's happening there.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions for me or any suggestions that you might have, you can follow me or reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at Isagamikura. Just to kind of touch base on the collab and keep that momentum going, do give the Omega Sisters a follow on YouTube or on Twitter as well. Omega Sisters on YouTube or on Twitter at OmeSisRay and OmeSisRio. I actually took a look at their channel. They definitely give off that really chaotic vibe that a lot of people tend to have that charm for. So you'll definitely find a lot of really unique content on their pages.
I would say chaotic is maybe even an understatement. My goodness.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, actually, someone in the server actually did a little bit of research on where exactly they came from, because, quite frankly, I've actually never heard of the Omega Sisters prior to last week when they announced the collab. And based on what was announced and that I read, they actually were part of the same company that debuted Kizuna Ai, the original VTuber. But something happened within the company, and they actually became their own independent VTubers following that.
Wow. Okay, I had no idea. That's a cool development.
Yeah, for sure. Especially knowing that they came out with the same family as the original with Miss I.
Beautiful, beautiful. You can kind of see the same chaos. That's it's starting from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. But in any case, thanks again, folks, for stopping by. Always happy to have you in to visit. Until next time, this is your host, Kura Isagami of the Medarot News Network, with special guest, my dear buddy Ruben. Thanks again, pal, for stopping by. I do appreciate you hosting this episode with me this week.
Don't worry. Thank you so much for having me, and it was a ton of fun.
No problem. Hope to have you again for another episode. Until next time, folks, this is Kura Isagami, signing out.